July 4, 1989. In a densely populated area of Belgium, near the town of Kortrijk, a dramatic and almost unbelievable event shocked the locals and soon astonished aviation experts around the world. On a clear summer day, a private home belonging to the Delar family was struck by a Soviet military jet. A Belgian teenager tragically lost his life, while the pilot survived because he had ejected from the fighter nearly an hour earlier, landing safely on Polish soil. Yes, the aircraft had traveled from Poland to Belgium without a pilot. It was a case unlike anything in aviation history. But given the tense political atmosphere of the late Cold War, the story was highly inconvenient for the Soviet Union. Officials quickly worked to suppress it. The man at the center of the incident, Colonel Nikolai Yegorovich Skuridin, a senior political officer in the Soviet Air Force, was discreetly advised not to talk too much. By the summer of 1989, Skuridin had been serving with the Northern Group of Forces for about a year. He held the position of chief of the political department of an aviation division, which required him to maintain flight qualifications. On July 4th, he prepared for a routine training flight aboard a MiG-23 fighter jet from an airfield near the city of Kołobrzeg, Poland. The aircraft took off smoothly, but barely 40 seconds after liftoff, a violent jolt shook the jet, possibly caused by a bird entering the air intake. It happened at an altitude of only 90 meters. The engine's power dropped sharply, and the MiG began losing speed. Skuridin managed to steer the jet away from the city toward the sea and ejected. As he descended by parachute, he saw his fighter cross the coastline and disappear over the Baltic waves. Radar operators soon reported the loss of the aircraft somewhere over coastal waters. A pair of Soviet fighters scrambled to search, but found nothing. Commanders concluded that the jet had crashed into the sea and breathed a sigh of relief that no one had been hurt. Nobody suspected the MiG was still flying. Meanwhile, the pilotless aircraft continued westward, across East Germany, then West Germany. The German air defense network failed to intercept it in time. By the time NATO jets scrambled, the Soviet fighter had already entered Belgian airspace. Later, some West German pilots claimed they flew alongside the Soviet jet and even saw the empty cockpit. But there were no photographs to prove it, and every modern military jet carries onboard cameras. A photo of an unmanned MiG with red stars, flying over NATO territory, would have made front-page news across the world. No such image ever surfaced. The MiG remained airborne for more than an hour after Skuridin ejected. By that time, the colonel had already been checked into a hospital for minor injuries from his parachute landing, undergone X-rays, and returned to his headquarters. Then came shocking news from Western radio. A Soviet MiG-23, tail number 29, has crash-landed near Brussels. The aircraft had torn through a fence, clipped a veranda, and tragically struck a young man who happened to be standing there. Hearing this report, Skuridin and his fellow officers were stunned. How could a malfunctioning, pilotless jet possibly make it all the way to Belgium? Later investigations revealed that the autopilot had saved the MiG from an immediate crash. In Skuridin's regiment, it was standard procedure to switch it on before takeoff and leave it active throughout the flight. The black box recording showed something strange. At 41 seconds after takeoff, the engine's RPM dropped sharply. The cause was never determined, as much of the engine was never recovered. After 15 seconds, the power returned. By then, Skuridin was already gone. The engine then fluctuated several times, stabilizing and maintaining thrust until the fuel finally ran out. Once the engine stopped, the aircraft began to glide. Each time it descended, aerodynamic lift pushed it back toward level flight. This repeated several times, until, in its final descent, the jet barely skimmed the ground and came down almost intact. A few days later, a Soviet Defense Ministry delegation arrived in Belgium. The investigation found no fault on the pilot's part. A dispute soon erupted between the Ministry of Aviation Industry and the Air Engineering Service, because the MiG's engine had been repaired 5 times in the previous year. Yet no one could determine why it had behaved so unpredictably. Commenting on the event, Lieutenant General Yevgeny Shaposhnikov, the then deputy commander of the Soviet Air Force, stated, "This case is unique in aviation history. Never before has a combat aircraft, abandoned by its pilot, continued such a long, uncontrolled flight." Have you heard any other versions or hidden details about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. And see you next time on the channel.